Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 253. And we are back, as promised, with part 2 of our catch-up, round-up on things we've been listening to or watching in my case. And we were going to do everything in one episode, but we realised when we were halfway through that we were already sort of up on time. So we decided to split it. So we are back here again, and Terri's got her second non-fiction book that she's been listening to tell us all about. Terri?
Well, Daisy, the other book that I wanted to share with you is a book called Finish, Give Yourself the Gift of Done by Jon Acuff. This book was actually recommended by one of my TFM clients and one of our members, and she found it very useful because what it does is it helps those of us who tend to make a plan and spin around and spin around and spin around and not finish. And so it's really about a primary reason why many of us don't finish or get things done is due to perfectionism. So it either prevents us from moving forward or even starting a project, or it delays us finishing a project because we just keep going until it's perfect. And I'm sure a lot of listeners, and you and I both, I think, can relate to this idea that sometimes we don't do things because we wait until we have the perfect approach. We wait until we know everything we need to know about it before we begin.
Procrastination.
Absolutely. And, again, his premise really is about the perfectionism that gets in the way. And I just felt like for me, it was one of those books that every couple of minutes of listening, there would be another mic drop of, oh yeah, that's exactly what happens. Either for me or for clients that I'm working with, community members that I'm talking to, friends that I'm talking to. There were just so many applicable things. The other thing I thought was really interesting in the book is he does go through some research. Now, how robust the research is, I don't know. But so, for example, he had a program where people were going to set a goal and accomplish their goal in 30 days. And what he had them do, I think it was 30 days, what he had them do is cut their goal in half. And that is one of the strategies he talks about. And interestingly, what he found, those who cut their goal in half achieved more than half. And actually, I think most of them achieved the full goal. But those who kept the initial goal fell short.
Interesting.
And so this idea of, in some ways, lowering our expectation. Again, particularly if we tend to be people who struggle with perfectionism and getting it just right, lowering the expectation. And I know some people are cringing as they hear this. They're so concerned about, gosh, if I lower the expectations for myself, I will do nothing. But there is some science behind this. And then the other option that he proposed from that same study, but he said either you cut your goal in half or you double the time. And in my work at TFM, it's often people have a weight loss goal. I'm going to lose 50 pounds by my 50th birthday, and that's on July 3rd. And then as they get closer to that date, they're not reaching it. So they don't take any of the steps because they feel so defeated. Instead, if they cut the goal in half, if they extended the timeline, there is more potential that they can start to really see the progress and let that help them build that motivation. So I think for some of us, it's about setting more realistic expectations for ourselves, not expecting so much so quickly and at such a high caliber, but really being more realistic.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, I found that. I know we, not always, but we often talk about weight loss. It's something that affects both of us. It affects people we know, work with, whatever. But so many of us have been on on and off a weight loss journey most of our lives. But I certainly feel like I've learned so much from previous efforts, and I'm on a period of time where I did gain a fair amount of weight last year, particularly towards the end. I just sort of went a bit crazy, a lot crazy. Everything just came in, and the depression was feeding in and everything. Things just went wild, and I really could enter a competition for weight gain. I can do it exceptionally well and exceptionally quickly. But this time around, my goals have been very different. So yes, it's being realistic about the goals with, like you say, about the time frame. I'm looking at a year, or the approaching things with intention I've planned for about a year. I've got a sort of idea of where I'd like to be based on the kind of weight level I've been before and where I feel good at, but there's no fixed amount. And, my focus is much more on how I'm feeling mood-wise, looking at my fitness levels, improving strength, things like that. Yes, weight is part of it because it's a metric that is a useful one to track progress of weight loss, which does tell you something about the journey you're on. But it's very much not the number one priority. It's not about, for me, it's not about the way I look. It's not about how much I weigh, other than how it impacts other things like, how I'm feeling. It's not about getting into a specific dress size or anything like that. I knew that it was something I needed to address because it was starting to affect me physically. I was feeling it on my joints, getting a bit out of breath, things like that. I knew it was all feeding into the mood issues with depression. So I very much had a different driving force and a much less fixed goal and a much more realistic time frame. So I think those things that he talked about definitely fed into making a plan and creating the strategies that would help me get to where I wanted to. But none of it I don't feel pressured in the same way as I have before. And I don't feel like I'm obsessing about the weight loss. And in actual fact, the weight loss I felt was too fast to start with. And I thought, hold on a minute. You need to track what's going on here because you're losing too much too fast. And that's not good. Crazy thing to say, right? But no, actually it's not. A long-term sustainable weight loss plan, the healthy way to do it is not to do it too fast. And when I tracked, I got a nasty shock about how much I was under eating and had to really focus on eating more, which, crazy. But it just feels all a bit more relaxed, and it all feels like my focus is on the right things, which is health and well-being. It sounds a bit corny, but it's true.
Absolutely.
Probably has something to do with getting older and caring less about what I look like, but, that's by the by.
But also helping to, refocus on what is driving the goal. What is it that you're actually seeking?
It's much easier to make the better choices, isn't it? You talk about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got, just losing weight, you think it's a powerful motivator, but actually it's not as powerful as really tuning into what makes me feel good, what makes me feel better, what makes me more productive.
And getting out of that perfectionistic, I've got to do it just so, the rigidity of plans that sometimes we fall into, or again, the pressure of pace. And it's, I think, such a good book. And I read one review of it, and clearly this person did not appreciate it in the same ways I did. Of course, I was listening to it on audio, and so he reads it, the author reads it, and I liked his tone. I liked his humor. She called it dad humor and, just didn't appreciate his tone. I liked it. So this might be one of those books that some people do better with if they read the actual book version. I really enjoyed the audio version of it. I often really enjoy hearing the author because they know where they are joking. They know where they want emphasis. And it, to me, just is even more meaningful when they read it. So I thought it was a great book. I thought it's so great. And so many people had started picking it up in the community. So I think it's very applicable for people. And again, not just around weight loss, any goals. His goals, I think that his people that he was working with were business goals or other goals. So I think this is applicable for everyone, not only those of us focused on weight loss or weight management, but lots of things that we set out to do. And I am notorious for starting things and then putting it away and never coming back to it. So this idea of finishing. And I think the other thing about it that many of us don't realize by not finishing things is there is a satisfaction. There is a self-worth sometimes that we really gain from finishing things. And I've been missing out on that by leaving so many things undone. So I think it's a great book, and I think many people would benefit from it. Like I said, whether it's a weight loss goal or other things that you're working on in your life, I think it's very applicable.
Yeah, those unfinished things always lurk in the back of your mind, don't they? Even if you can't physically see them. And I agree with you about, unless they're a terrible narrator, not with fiction, or very rarely with fiction, but with non-fiction, I like to hear the author reading it as well. As you say, I think usually it adds weight to it. It sounds like something that really you're going to get a lot of value out of to help the people you work with, as well as sharing it here. It sounds like a very handy book, as you say, for all sorts of things. Well, the other thing that I've got to share is a little bit of fun, really. It's music. Now, we must all know, I don't know anyone who won't know and be able to sing in their heads Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence. Goes back to, I don't know, it's 68 or something. And it's a song we all know well. And I can't remember how it popped up. I think a video popped up of a music critic of some kind doing one of these reaction videos to a video that I hadn't seen. A guy, or it must be a group, I suppose, called Disturbed, and his version of this song. And I don't know, have you listened to it? Have you watched that?
Disturbed? No.
Well, you will want to after this. Just like the person who was reacting to it, I was a bit blown away, actually. It's a very, very different version, a very powerful, very emotional, and it has quite a stark, literally, it's a black and white video, but it's quite powerful imagery. And the way he sings it, well, I think this original guy that I was watching, when he was reacting to it, he said that it was like he was not really listening to it for the first time, but hearing the lyrics for the first time. And I felt that. I sort of, Simon and Garfunkel's, kind of the lyrics, but they sort of washed over you a bit. The way this guy delivers it really, really makes you listen to what the lyrics are saying and actually how powerful they are and how relevant they are for today. But that's not the video I'm talking about. The video I'm talking about, which caught my eye, that's right, I was trying to remember how I got to it. You know how you stumble across things on YouTube. I actually saw something come up on my feed, a Swedish guy of some kind doing a version that blew everyone away, as it always does. And his version was kind of similar to this Disturbed version. Same kind of powerful delivery. But this video popped up and it was a neurologist reacting to Disturbed's Sound of Silence. And of course, no, I haven't written down her name, which is terrible, but I have got the link, so I'll put it in the notes so you can go and watch it. But I thought it was really interesting. As soon as I saw Neurologist, I thought, well, this will be an interesting take on it. Let's hear what she's got to say. And she was great. And she's actually a very good singer for herself. I had a bit of a nosy around her channel. She does she does all sorts of videos, some of these reaction to music videos. She thinks that, music is very powerful, and she talks a little bit about what's going on in the brain when we listen to music. But so she's doing a reaction to this video, and her video was very interesting. It was posted around about the time of the US election, and she talks about divisiveness and what is going on in our brain. And I won't go into great detail, but we've talked about this before, and the difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, all that stuff. And others have said this, and I agree, that this version, as I said before, really gets you to listen to the lyrics. It's very powerful, very moving. But she does a really great job of dissecting the lyrics and the video imagery, so really treating it as a whole, as well as talking more generally about empathy and neuroscience. So she digs into what's going on in our brain. And she mentions that there's evidence that music can bring people together. I think we all know that naturally. Oxytocin is one of the things that's released with music that moves us, and it makes you feel closer to others. It activates reward systems and pleasure, and she talks about how it mirrors the emotional states of others. And of course, that's where empathy comes in, going back to that, talking about divisiveness and the timing of when she did it. She was obviously reflecting on things that were going on around the election, all these things that we've talked about silos and divisiveness and all that kind of stuff. So she really digs into the power of music, the power of this particular song. And so I found it really, really interesting. And I think you would too. I think you'd like her take on it. Like I say, she does a very, very good job of getting into it and commenting on it, but also really interesting throwing these neuroscience bits in as well. But yes, if you haven't listened to this version, have a listen. I think you'll probably be a little bit blown away too.
It sounds really powerful. I love when people, I'm going to use art as my example, but I am sometimes someone who reads into things and goes for deeper meaning. And sometimes I'm very concrete and I don't, like, it's almost a stretch for me to go to some of those deeper levels. And I remember going to the art museum here in the US in Washington, D.C., and being so underwhelmed by pieces of art. I would look at the people next to me and I would think, what are you seeing in this? Because all I see is a gigantic canvas that's painted red. I could have painted this. There's no meaning to it. There's no talent to it. And I would say this to some people, like, I could do a big canvas with one quadrant of green and one of blue and one of red and one of black. How is this art? And they said, but Terri, you didn't do it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's that. So sometimes I kind of fail to see the deeper meaning. And then sometimes I'm so invested in the deeper meaning of things, and I can't not see it or feel it or hear it or whatever. And so I'm really curious now to get to see this video and to see her analysis of it and interpretation. So very excited.
I thought it was a good twist because a lot of these reaction videos, from an SEO point of view, they're just jumping on popular videos, but some of them are just a sort of straight emotional reaction. There's a lot of sort of musical technique critique videos, obviously, on music videos. But I just thought this was a interesting, different perspective. And I just loved the way she brought in things that we're often talking about. And I completely agree with you with the way you look at things and how they affect us. And I can remember the debates around this with, particularly in English literature. The further you go with it, the more you get into looking at the critical works that are talking about it. I did English literature at university, and I remember getting often more interested in the especially feminist type critical works, more interested in those as works of themselves, talking about, whatever film they were talking about or piece of writing. And I think you can also enjoy things on different levels. So you can watch Alien was one of them, for example. You can watch the film Alien just on I'm just going to enjoy this cinematic experience. It's, it's fun, it's scary, it's whatever. And then you can get into all the critical works and really dig into what's being said here about feminism and what's being said about this, that, and the other. And you can enjoy things on different levels. You don't always have to dissect what the author meant about what they were writing about, or the film they were making, or the music they were making, or whatever it is. But sometimes that's really interesting, and sometimes it moves us and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a piece of art, you'll be stood there transfixed and it'll move you and you'll get emotional about it, and other times I'm not getting this red canvas. I think this is art, isn't it? It's how we react to different things. But talking about cinema and it really does depend on the film, but there's nothing quite like having been to watch something at the cinema when the whole audience has really enjoyed it. I always come back from watching a film like that at the cinema feeling really buzzed. I really, really get a kick out of it, that shared experience. And it's the same with music.
It's funny, as you were just saying that, I was thinking, I've often described myself as someone who can be underwhelmed by things. And there will be a big movie or a big book that everyone is raving about. Everyone talks about it being the best at this or having this. And I see it and I just don't enjoy it, or I don't see it or whatever. And I am the anti-fan of so many things that everyone loves. I remember even in high school, there would be a movie that would come out and everyone loved it. And I would go see it and wonder, what in the world made this so popular?
There's nothing worse than going to see a film with too high expectation of it. I always try and resist. If I know I'm going to go and see something, I try and not get anything more than a vague sense of whether people have enjoyed it. But there's nothing worse. If you go with such a high expectation, it's almost always going to fall a bit flat.
Here in the US, every year there are the Academy Awards. And often I have not seen any of the films that are being discussed. So it's almost always a prompt to think, maybe I should see some of these. And of course, I am almost always underwhelmed by them, but then I try to understand, why did this get the acclaim that it did? What about the acting? What about the production, the costumes, the meaning? So far, I think I've only watched one film from this year's Oscars. But yeah, I am often the one who is off on a different plane, according to others.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what you think about this video.
Very good.
I think you'll like it.
I've already pulled it up on my screen, so after we finish, I can get in there.
Okay, well, until we meet next time, I hope you have a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.